I'm just going to give you a brief overview about what do we mean by scaling at CMIT, and to try to start framing this process and both this webinar that we're going to have today. And the thing with scaling is that the word is everywhere right now, no? But we're not very good at it in understanding the meaning or how to do it or how to explain it sometimes. But it's getting very popular around our community in development, even on the startups and in finance, in the development sector in general. We are amazed by the quantity and the deepness of the discussions that we're having right now. So because scaling is a very broad concept for today, for this session, let's try to think that we can define it as the scaling of innovations is a process of increasing the use of an innovation to scale that matches the need over time. So what do we mean by this? We will see that in a second. So the reality with projects is that most of the times we have this very nice graph from a project from Guatemala a long time ago, where they could collect the data, and you can see that during the project duration, the image in yellow, there was an increase on adoption on the innovations they were promoting. However, when the innovation started, when the project ended, the innovation started to drop, the adoption started to drop. Why this happened? Because there are major issues, because usually projects tend to focus on those X innovation work, and sometimes it's less the attention on how my X innovation work at scale in the real conditions. So there is a tendency to regard scaling as an end and not the means to achieve impact at scale, right? So another challenge that we have is that projects often create control environments that do not represent the reality at scale. The incentives, the handouts, how do we organize collaborations? How do we shield from politics, from the markets? So let's think that we are in this sphere, in this aquarium, that everything is controlled. But then we say, okay, we know how to swim, we know the temperature, we know how to eat, but then let's go to the real ocean, and then the sharks appear, no? So really, the thing here about scaling is how do we start recognizing those sharks, recognizing how things work in the real world. For this, we use this pyramid to recognize there are 3 different dimensions of scaling, and that projects in general, also I will imagine, and I want to listen carefully from the presentations, we have 3 main dimensions: the scaling out of our projects, where we refer to reaching more people with an innovation through multiplication, dissemination, extension. So that means more of the same, right? How we replicate with more plots, more farmers. And it comes from the paradigm of the Industrial Revolution, no? More of the same. And then, I'm sorry for that, but then the third, let's think about the scaling up, that refers to transforming the institutional conditions to allow efficient scaling out. That means collaborations, alliance with policies, new rules of the game to really allow that others, individual organizations, can work and collaborate at different scales. So instead of 1 + 1 being 2, 1 + 1 being 3, right? So because you have a network of stakeholders and organizations collaborating. And then we have the pyramid, could be very broad and very tall, but if you don't have the deepness, it's going to fall apart. So we need to take into account the scaling deep, that is changing the minds, the values, and cultural practices to make use of the innovation, a new routine for the people. And I love this example from colleagues from Latin America, farmer that shared with me that conservation agriculture was not perceived as a good practice, because other farmers in his community were believing that that farmer that was practicing conservation agriculture was a dirty farmer because he was letting the rest of the crops on the soil. Then when the chip changes, when the value changes, when the minds change and they say, no, that farmer is nurturing the soil, he's doing good farming, that's when things starting to be adopted and adapted, and also generated a movement around those farmers and communities. So changing minds and values of what the practices mean and the values behind those are critical. These three dimensions are complementary. There might be projects where you do more of the scaling out and less of the scaling up and less of the scaling deep, but for successful scaling, we argue that we need to take into account the three dimensions in different proportions depending on the project and the conditions. So just to start closing, we have important lessons. 10% for the successful scaling is the innovation, and 90% is the context. No, we need to go beyond the technological improvements and pay more attention to understanding and innovating the enabling social, economical, and political context. No, with who are we collaborating? What are we doing? For whom we are working? No, as Mura was saying, how do we really connect with women and men, with youth? And the second point is only local actors, public and private, can sustain and grow whatever a donor-funded project can achieve. And we need to focus on the willingness and ability to scale from the beginning. So I'm very excited to hear today how we have been engaging with these local actors and how and what type of activities we have been deploying at field level and the achievements of that. I'm sure we have more lessons that we will hear today, and then we can exchange during the mural session. So I will invite you to listen to the following presentations. What are the main challenges? What has worked well? And what are the potential next steps to really closure this project in the best case, no? And if you want more information about scaling methodology, approach, coffee, a discussion about this, please connect with us. Leonard Waldering and I, we're the scaling team at CIMIT. Here are our emails and contact point, very active on Twitter, and very happy to hear the following presentations. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, María, y vamos justo a tiempo.
Thank you very much, Maria, and we're right on time. And so then for the questions, after each one of the speakers, we have 5 minutes to hear the questions. So that you can have a question, we have a chat function here. You can place them in the chat function, and Kaje, you can open your microphones as well to post the questions directly to Maria. So I'm going to grant a couple of minutes in case you have any questions. And if I do not see that there are any questions, then we can move on to the next one.
Pásate, Crescencio.
Sí, gracias, María.
Crescencio, thank you very much, Maria, for that presentation. Now, what are your bases or the grounds to say that innovation is only 10% and not 40% or 30% or 60%? Thank you.
Tenemos en el 2017-2018
in collaboration with the PPP Lab, that is a consortium for the development of cooperation with the Netherlands. They developed an extensive study on case studies for different projects for development, as well as from the agricultural sector, as well as from the hydraulic center, from water sector. They identified the different ingredients for the success of the scaling projects, and they identified that there were 10 big ingredients. One of them was the topic about technology, whereas in order to sustain the development of these technological innovations, there had to be other 9 forms of innovations: economical, social, organizational, like demand, financing, training, knowledge, public policy, collaborations, business models, value chain, leadership, governance, and I'm missing one, evidence and lessons. or insights. And at the end of it all, this is a combination of innovations that push forth the development of a technology as such. We can have a perfect technology that develops, that is technically developed in a lab, in an excellent production unit or a plot. But if we do not have the other innovations that are non-technological related to accompany it, it's not going to scale up and it will remain at a lab level. And very gladly, I can share with you that study later on, and I can place it in the chat in case you're interested. Thank you. Excellent. A reminder, is it possible to change language? It is possible to change language, but we have to change the channel in the interpretation. And so we have time for another quick question. Kim is asking, what happens when one of the dimensions is not met, is not fulfilled? Is it still possible to do the scaling up? I think it's possible. However, generally speaking, ideally, we should meet or fulfill the 3 dimensions. As I told you a while ago, not necessarily, well, our projects can be focused on the scaling up out, but we have to think in internal and vertical scaling. So they are complementary in some projects. Certain dimensions can be more important than others, but generally speaking, if one reflects on this, the 3 dimensions in success cases, you will